Now, since this is one of the most common causes of sudden performance dips, the effects of competition are worth a special mention here. If you find yourself investigating an unexpected jump in CPC, one of the prime suspects will be increased competition, either from a new competitor or from one or more competitors starting to bid more aggressively. The way to check this is with the Auction Insights report. The metrics in this report can be a little bit hard to parse, and I still need to stop and reread their definitions sometimes. The key thing to keep in mind is what is the total out of which each one is giving you a percentage. So for impression share, you've got to remember that it's just looking at the impressions for which you are eligible within the campaign or ad group that you've got selected here. And that is the overall size of the pie. So this isn't giving you any real indication of these competitors' Google Ads activity in general. Then for overlap rate, the total, the 100%, would be all of the impressions that you actually did receive, and for what percentage of those the competitor also showed in the same auction. Then position above takes just the portion of impressions for which you did overlap with each competitor. So we've reduced the scope again, and it tells you out of those overlapping auctions in which you both showed your ad, how often did theirs appear above yours. So just use these metrics carefully and remember their limitations. One important limitation is that overlap is not in itself any kind of problem, and position above, as we mentioned, only takes account of those auctions in which you do overlap. So if overlap rate is low, then a high position above doesn't really have much impact on you. And if position above is low, then a high overlap isn't really a problem. The metric here that I find correlates best to rising CPC is actually absolute top, especially if you're looking at a brand campaign, in which you yourself expect to be at or near the absolute top of the auction. And more often than not, it is when you're investigating a rise in brand campaign CPCs that this report comes into play. Now, this standard Auction Insights report does give you some solid data about your status against the competition within the set of auctions for which you're currently competing. But it lacks some basic and important functionality. When we open Auction Insights, we usually want to know whether and how competition levels have changed. But the report is conspicuously lacking in any way to show changes over time. It has no time series chart, and unlike most of the standard reports, it doesn't even allow you to make a date range comparison to show changes within the table. So, to assess changes over time, you need to open this report twice, with one instance having a date range set to before the date of the decline, which hopefully we isolated above, and one for the equivalent date range afterwards, and then you spot the difference between the two. Now, these functionality gaps were addressed at the end of 2020 in Auction Insights version 2, which is only available in the Reporting tab. And this report does have those missing features, allowing you to see changes over time in this nice graph format. So that's a side path in the diagnostic journey, which you might quite often take if you find that your issue stems from a rise in CPCs. And this is among several common patterns and causes that you'll find when you carry out this kind of diagnosis. Here's a list of some of the other most